It's wacky, nutty, strange, bizarre. I'll tell you who the inhabitants are. Gimbos, bleezers, snorkels, and a gurk or two. You'll think you landed up on Mars or visited one too many bars where monkey shines, not moonshine, runs the brew. Welcome one and all. Y'all come have a ball. Things are very fine, riding on the old Knott's Berry line. But once you make it safe through there, you'll see a wonderland waiting where the fun and foolish frolic never ends. It's New Year's Eve and the 4th of July, rolling one and riding high. It's the fabulous fair you've waited for, my friend. Welcome one and all. Y'all come have a ball. Things are very fine, riding on the old Knott's Berry line.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yay. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon to our gorgeous Central Library. My name's Christina Rice. I am the senior librarian of the library's photo collection. And if you were not aware, yes, we do have a historic photo collection. Around 4 million photos of life in Los Angeles dating back to the 1850s to the present, every format you could think of. Please visit tessa.lapl.org and you can dive in, lose a few hours of your life. It'll totally be worth it. Yes, thank you. Yes, photo collection, yay. If you have time today, after the program is over, if you want to go down to our History and Genealogy department on lower level 4, we currently have an exhibition, LA's legendary and landmark restaurants featuring photos from our collection, so we encourage you to go take a look at that. But let's get to why we are here. So we're here to present about this new book, Knott's Berry Tales. If you haven't already gotten a copy, we will have them for sale in the lobby, and there will be a signing, so if you already bought your book, be sure to get it signed after. And they brought these prints, and they're free, so grab a free print while you're here, so don't forget. If you did park underneath our building, don't forget to get validated. You can do that at the information desk. You do need a library card, and if you don't have one yet, why don't you? So get a library card before you leave. Lots of resources available for you, and as long as you are a resident in the state of California, your LAPL library card will be free. So now I am pleased to bring out our two presenters. Southern California native Christopher Merritt has over 30 years of ride and show design experience, creating theme park attractions and environments around the world. He has served as an art director and production designer at theme parks located in California, Florida, Tokyo, Singapore, and Shanghai. Can you guess what company that is? He co-authored the book Pacific Ocean Park, The Rise and Fall of Los Angeles' Space-Age Nautical Pleasure Pier, and Mark Davis, in his own words, Imagineering at the Disney theme parks. Urban anthropologist J. Eric Lynxwiler is a Knott's Berry Farm historian. While attending UCLA, he spent one school year behind the counter of Knott's original electric shooting gallery and works today as a graphic designer on Knott signage, merchandise, and a series of berry market preserves. He's been a volunteer and neon cruise guide for the Museum of Neon Art in Glendale, California for 25 years. He also co-authored books on the history of neon signs in Los Angeles and the history of Wilshire Boulevard. He currently lives 20.9 miles from Knott's. In addition to this Berry Tales book, Eric and Chris also co-authored Knott's Preserved from Boysenberry to Theme Park, the history of Knott's Berry Farm. Chris and Eric, come on out.
Well, howdy. So good to see you guys. And I see so many people dressed in purple too. That's kind of awesome.
Thank you so much for coming out. It's on? There
It's
we
on.
go. Great. Thank you so much for coming out on this rainy, gloomy, overcast Southern California day, everyone. We appreciate it. So,
Oh, I need to ask first. First question. Did you ride Knott's Berry Tales, the original?
wow,
Yes.
look at this.
Oh, I'm so happy to see
Very,
it.
very cool. Very,
Just in case you were wondering, that childhood fever dream is a reality. It was real, it was real. And it took 4 years of time to put this book together, dealing with thousands of images that came directly from the designers and artists who put the ride together themselves. And it was a hell of an undertaking.
It was. It took us 4 years. It was much more complicated, and this is coming from two guys who did a whole book on the entire history of Knott's Berry Farm, so it was very, very challenging. But we appreciate you coming out. We're pretty proud of it, and it's so much more than Knott's Berry Tales, the ride, and that's pretty much what we're going to focus on this presentation today, but there's a lot more in the book, too, just going over the history of Knott's in the 70s and 80s. So one other thing real quick before we get started here, wanted to let you know that there is a word we use in this book. It is a slur offensive to people of Romani descent, but because of the name of a certain attraction or a land at Knott's Berry Farm, we literally cannot tell the story of this book without saying it. So when we talk about Gypsy Camp, we are going to use the word. That said, let's go ahead and dive on in and take a look at what Knott's Berry Farm was like in the late 60s and early 1970s.
Did you ever dream of traveling in a time machine? Going back to the ages of adventure? Perhaps to find yourself careening into a lusty, roaring town of the old western frontier, rubbing shoulders with legendary characters right out of Bret Hart and Mark Twain. The sights and sounds of yesterday, today. You won't need to find a time machine for all this. Just come for a visit to Knott's Berry Farm. Across another time zone into the 18th century, and you are witness to the colorful pageant of the American Revolution. Knott's Berry Farm's a great adventure for the entire family. Plenty of free parking.
That's right. Plenty of free parking in 1970 at Knott's Berry Farm. And actually, can we maybe pull the lights down just a little bit so this reads a little bit better? It's okay, we don't need to see our faces that clearly. That's great, awesome. Thank you so much. So Knott's Berry Farm in the late 1960s and early 70s, Eric and I are trying to get across it. It's a very different place, right, Eric?
Yeah, Knott's Berry Farm way back then, it was just Western entertainment. It was history. You had to be something involved with history or religion.
Yep. And to that end, believe it or not, at Knott's Berry Farm, going back to the 40s, there were not one but two functioning chapels at Knott's Berry Farm. The little chapel by the lake, some of you might remember, and the slightly terrifying blacklight Christ, whose eyes would slowly open. And there was a full functioning Church of the Reflections with Sunday services that actually still is on property on the farm across the street to this day. But one of the things in the late 1960s that Walter Knott was very, very big on is promoting conservatism, and he actually took one of the old little farmhouses and turned it into an education center he called the Freedom Center. He was very concerned about basically very liberal and the hippies in the 1960s, and so you could go to this farmhouse and you could actually check out a lending library of things from the John Birch Society and why communism is cancerous and all these things. So this is all part of your theme park visit to Knott's Berry Farm in the late 1960s. Additionally, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Independence Hall, right? Now, Eric, it's a full-size, one-to-one recreation of Independence Hall, right?
Absolutely, and you've probably seen it in the movie American Treasure.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, it was used in the filming with Nicolas Cage, just in case you were wondering.
And Walter Knott's idea behind this was not that he was just going to make a full brick-by-brick recreation of Independence Hall, which he did do. That whole area was actually going to be an educational center where he was, think of it kind of like a Williamsburg recreation sort of a thing. And he was going to basically teach the youth of the 1960s about conservatism, patriotism, and the Founding Fathers was the idea. He never got farther than Independence Hall, but still, it's fascinating to see. Let's take a look at this little video of the opening.
Independence Hall was dedicated on the 4th of July, 1966, just 190 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Over the years, millions of Americans visiting Independence Hall here at Knott's Berry Farm will be reminded of our great national heritage. The tour begins in Heritage Hall, the companion building nearby. In a little theater, visitors are shown a film that outlines some of the events in history that tell of man's struggle for freedom and independence. Attractive young ladies dressed in authentic colonial costumes conduct the tour.
They must be attractive.
Arriving at the main entrance, the tour enters the Tower Room. The Liberty Bell occupies a place of honor and demands a feeling of reverence. The guide tells the story of the Liberty Bell, which has become a symbol of freedom for all Americans. Next, the tour enters the Declaration Chamber.
And it's all still there.
Right. We highly recommend you actually go visit it. The lonely person in the gift shop would be very grateful if you went and visited there, actually.
And all of the costumes that those lovely blonde women wore.
Attractive
Young women.
Right.
All of those costumes were apparently later repurposed for a Knott's Scary Farm werewolf maze, just to let you know. Nothing goes to waste.
So this is a very different place at Knott's, and then also in the late, in the 1960s, let's take a look at what the family, Walter Knott had 4 children, Russell Knott, his son, and 3 daughters, Virginia, Marion, and Tony, and let's see what they were doing during this time.
The Knott children, now grown up, are equal partners in the farm. Russell Knott is the manager of this family enterprise, and with the farm growing every day, his responsibilities are increasing in every direction. As visitors to the farm browse through the 42 specialty shops, they are likely to encounter other members of the family. The gift shop features fabulous items imported from all over the world. The shop is operated by Virginia Knott Reef Snyder. Whether you're looking for a souvenir, a gift for the folks back home, or something for your home, you'll find it here. If you like casual clothes and sportswear, drop in at the sports shop. Marion and Tony, the other 2 daughters, have found their careers in fashions. Marion Knott Anderson specializes in smart sportswear and dresses. Tony Knott Oliphant is the expert in the field of children's wear.
Well, a lot of our book has a lot to do with Marion Knott, and we're big fans of Marion. Marion very quickly would not end up just folding clothes in a gift shop, but actually step forward, and to our mind, she really is the first female theme park creative executive like ever. It's all old guys before her. And what's Marion gonna do? Well, Marion is gonna do something amazing. During this time, sadly, Walter Knott is suffering from Parkinson's disease after he does Independence Hall. He's not doing too well, and he turns over the day-to-day operations of Ghost Town to his youngest daughter, Marion. And what's the first thing Marion does, Eric?
Well, she wants to build a gate. She wants to actually charge $1 admission in order to put a gate all around Knott's Berry Farm. And a few folks don't realize that. Up until 1968, it was completely free. Any old hippie can just walk in and sleep in it at night.
Yep. So, the first thing that you do when you enclose a place, and you actually start charging admission, well, then you have to have something worthwhile for people to come see in the park, right? And that's what she sets about doing. And the first thing she does is a wonderfully successful area in the basically northeast corner of the park. She creates an area, there's basically a bunch of little loosely grouped rides and animal, and she calls it Fiesta Village, right, Eric?
Well, Fiesta Village is a little bit of what Olvera Street is here in downtown Los Angeles.
Right.
It was Orange County's version of Fiesta Village. They only hired Mexican Americans to work there, and they filled the shops with everything that was imported from Mexico.
And wonderful little Bud Hurlbut designed attractions here, especially that wrought iron what do we call this? This is the version of the Mad Hatter ride here that they did. Is this the Sombrero ride? Yes?
Well, but it has many names, and we don't repeat them very often.
Right. But I love next time you go to Knott's, it's still there.
Yes.
And look at the beautiful wrought iron scroll work, and then you can compare it with if you ever go out to Castle Park in Riverside, which was Bud's retirement project. A lot of that same beautiful wrought iron work is there. So Fiesta Village is a big hit for Marion, and from there she goes, well, we got to grow the park even more. We got to try and do something else. So what's she going to do? Well, this is what she's going to do.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the incredible land known as Gypsy Camp. Probably the home of the worst rock work ever done. I call this crumpled paper bag rock work. It's certainly not commensurate with the sort of rock work that you would do today in any modern theme park. And the idea behind this area was, the biggest impetus behind it was the theater, right, Eric?
Yeah, but I just want to say, you guys can turn the lights down on us a little bit
Yeah, I think
more,
it's a little bright. I think
in case people need to see that crappy rock work a little
Perfect.
bit more.
Thank you so much. There we go. In fact, let's look at that rock work again. Look at that. That's fantastic, ladies and gentlemen.
We are going to be taking you into the darkness of a dark ride soon, but before that, I want to place you in terms of history. You're standing in this photograph, you're standing in Charleston Circle, and the doorway before you, which is the cave going into the John Wayne Theater and the John Wayne Museum, the doorway still exists. That's the entrance right now into the candy shop, former magic shop of the Roaring '20s.
So one of the big impetuses was they needed an indoor enclosed theater because the wagon camp, they couldn't operate it with big names during inclement weather. So that was one of the big reasons behind this. But Gypsy Camp, they were going to have a ride back there called the Gypsy Spinner, but they canceled it at the last minute. So it really becomes this loose conglomeration of shops. And what would you say you would experience in Gypsy Camp, Eric?
Absolutely nothing. No, to be blunt, there was a lot of entertainment in Gypsy Camp, but a lot of people wandered in there and they just didn't know what to expect because it was a land of hidden shopping, hidden games, hidden entertainment. You had to go inside the caves in order to experience something, and it was not very welcoming. Inside the John Wayne Theater, big, beautiful, professional stage, which is still there today, but it was the entertainment that they tried to keep people in their seats.
That's right. So really, entertainment becomes the name of the game in Gypsy Camp, and unfortunately, people don't understand what this place is. They don't, they're bringing in puppet shows, and then kind of as a, but really, it's not doing very well. And they basically start bringing in animal acts for people, and I'm sorry, but this is incredibly dangerous to do in front of guests right near you like that.
The Weeping Rock stage on your left-hand side, the Weeping Rock stage is actually where the bumper cars are today. But you can see the people in the foreground who have no idea what's going on 40 feet away from them, 20 feet in the air.
I mean, I'm sorry, that all it takes is one slip, so not the best idea. You know, they go, we've got to do something here, we've got to do something to zhuzh it up, we've got to do something to bring people in. They have an artist on staff who actually starts designing some little banners and things, and little flags, and comes up with some little backstories about some animals that might be running for political office in the gypsy camp. And one of the ideas he has is this little idea, this little dark ride about this little family of gypsies that are on their way to the fair, and it would have hundreds of marionettes in it. So that's kind of their idea on how to fix that. So that's where Knott's Berry Farm is in 1974. But the other big part of our book is one of our favorite artists of all time, Mr. Roland Fargo Crump. So much to say about Rolly Crump. We're such fans of Rolly. His son Chris is here today. Big influence on both of us. You know, Rolly is a famous Imagineer, worked for many, many years, had a lot to do with It's a Small World and the Haunted Mansion and many other attractions at Disneyland. And in the late 1960s, he actually is working as an in-park, in-field art director down at the park. So if you see some of these little gift shops and kiosks, or he's bringing the Mary Blair look to these trash cans, he's putting those little sayonara signs at the end of It's a Small World. And then in the late 1960s, Wed is actually designing Walt Disney World, and he gets tasked with redesigning Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. And Dick Irvine asks him to design not one, but two separate Mr. Toad Wild Ride attractions. He goes, why would we do that? Let's actually do it all in one building, 2 tracks with different show scenes that would almost hit each other. So that's what he did. But he's getting really frustrated with it, and he kind of hits a brick wall. He wants to do things in this dark ride, like he wants to mix incandescent and UV lighting, and he's told absolutely not. Dark rides only have UV lighting. I'm sorry, Rolly, that's it. So he decides to quit, and he goes on his merry way, and what does he do? He starts his own design company with a good childhood friend of his, Ernie Ball, who he went to Santa Monica High School with. They call it Design 27, and if you ever buy a pack of Ernie Ball guitar strings, look at the artwork on the cover, that's by Rolly. It's got that distinctive look behind it, and they open it in Newport Beach across the street from Hoag Hospital, right? And what do, Eric? They do all kinds of stuff here, right? They hire a bunch of 18 and 19-year-olds. They do packaging, they do trade show design. Basically, Rolly teaches all these young kids the entertainment, art business. They do posters, they do stuff for Ernie Ball guitar strings, they try and do condoms, of all things, if you can believe that.
The innuendo is rich, really.
Right, and it becomes this really freewheeling, kind of crazy environment, but he's really teaching them the business. And one of the big first jobs that lands in their lap for all these young kids that Rolly's teaching is a project called Circus World, out in Florida. And there's a gentleman named Irving Feld, and he was actually a majority stockholder with Barnum and Bailey Circuses, and he had a dream to build a theme park commensurate with Walt Disney World in Orlando. And so he hired Rolly and his team to come on out, design the park, and they actually got as far as designing the preview center, got that up and running. But one of the things I love so much about Rolly is a real infield art director, creative director. He's not just gonna sit on his little pedestal in his office and dictate. No, he's gonna get out into the field and get his hands dirty. So that's him actually painting the mural on the wall there on the ladder with everyone else. Okay, so Circus World, late 72, spring 74, they're working on it, they get the preview center open. The park actually ends up not happening, and that's really good for Rolly because he gets a call from Knott's Berry Farm. Turns out Marion Knott is trying to figure out how to fix her gypsy camp area. And what does she do? She goes, I need to design a little dark ride. And there's a gentleman at Knott's who is formerly from Disney and goes, well, you gotta hire Rolly Crump. He's great, right?
And now I have to point out, we reached the subject of the book itself.
Right.
We have to give you the background information as to exactly the foundation that Berry Tales was being built upon. So you know where Knott's Berry Farm was, and you know what Knott's Berry Tales is going to be. It's a whole new world.
Absolutely. And so, this is great because that drawing on the left there, that's actually Rolly's rough sketch he did on the plane flying back from Florida. He goes to his house, and he does all these beautiful drawings with pen and ink and marker on his kitchen table, and he brings them to the Knott family, who would meet weekly in a little farmhouse behind the chicken dinner restaurant, shows them all to them and goes, well, this is my idea for this little dark ride. Here's this little family of gypsies on their way to the fair, and they would go, and they go, we love it, you're sold, you've got the job, you've got a year. from concept to opening. So for those of you who work in the theme park industry or don't, like, that's insane. That's clearly insane to go from concept to opening in a year. But that's something that Rolly did not, actually he did in It's a Small World, right?
Yeah.
So what does he do? He goes right into production. He hires most of the kids who worked with him at Design 27. They open an office in Irvine, California. And a gentleman named Dave Rutterow, who worked for WED for a while, and Wendy Peltzer also get hired, and they start working immediately. And what's interesting to me about Dave Rutterow's artwork is he did all his artwork, he laid down his base in orange gesso. So all of his artwork has like an orange cast to it. It's kind of interesting. And he did these kind of beautiful overview renderings of like how the ride could go with the little family on their way to the fair.
But a gypsy ride and the gypsy camp sounded absolutely fantastic, totally perfect tie-in.
Right.
And you can see in these drawings, which are also in the book, that we have gypsies. They are making their puppets in these very familiar scenes. They're building marionettes, and that is their goal. But things are going to change.
Right. And then Wendy is doing basically like a couple hundred of these little thumbnail storyboards. And an interesting thing we figured out along the way is some of these drawings that Wendy did, Rolly actually just redrew in his own hand. So we have some examples of that. It's like, oh, okay, I like that. I'm going to redraw it in my hand.
we know where the idea came from. It was Wendy Peltzer.
That's right. But what's interesting is they're working through the idea of this ride, and at one point, this little idea of dancing bears with the families comes along, and Marion Knott loves the dancing bears, and everyone she shows the little bears to, she goes, oh, that's so cute. Can't we do something more with the little bears? And Rolly goes, sure, we can do more things with the bears.
And it's not just Berry Tales, it's Knott's and Berry.
Get it? Ah, ha, ha, ha. Yes. So B-E-A-R-Y, which is where that weird spelling of the ride comes from. But the idea was, okay, maybe it's not a little family anymore making marionettes. Maybe it's a little family of bears making pies and jams and jellies in a cave and taking them on their way to the fair, and you're going to journey along with them.
So all of those people wound up turning into little critters.
Right. So very quickly, it becomes a very cute little animal ride, right? Yeah. And I just love these illustrations by Rolly, just really, really fun. You know, we had a section with a frog forest. We have a section called the Weird Woods, which is just, you know, I remember asking Rolly, I said, what was this part with the Weird Woods? And he goes, I don't know, they're just weird guys.
We asked Rolly to his face, he's like, where did you get all these ideas? And he said, pot.
Now, any little attraction, you know, works a lot better if you have some sort of a bad guy or some sort of a foil, so you have some sort of like ups and downs, highs and lows in the attraction, or at least that's what I think. So he came up with this Dr. Fox character, kind of this snake oil huckster salesman, and he does end up being in the ride at the end of the ride. But what's interesting is that's not enough for Rolly, and Rolly comes up actually with a bad guy who follows you all the way through the ride, and you can see he's still wearing gypsy garb in this iteration. He calls him Carlos Coyote. Very soon, this character is reworked as Crafty Coyote, who basically becomes a character that is constantly stealing the pies throughout the ride, and you see them throughout the attraction.
But let's not ignore the awesome Baker Beaver with his flared pant legs.
Very fashionable. It is 1974, folks.
For 1970, perfect. The details in these drawings are excellent.
Yep. All right, so Rolly is working on this, and Rolly is trying to figure out, oh my gosh, how are we going to go into production on this and get this all built in a year? That's a big headache. Back at Knott's Berry Farm, Marion Knott is going, you know what? I'm sorry, like this gypsy theme, it's just not working. It's not gonna play, no one likes it, everyone's confused by it. How about this? What if, instead of a gypsy theme, what if we go back and we celebrate the year 1920, the year that my parents came to Buena Park? And we do something like that. But the problem is they really don't have enough money to actually start over again. So what do, Eric?
Well, they take all that awful rock work off of those cinder block buildings and they start again.
Yep.
The cinder block buildings are the core of what was Gypsy Camp. They become the core of what will become the Roaring 20s.
Right. So what you're looking at right here, like that's the load station for Berry Tales, right?
That's the front, that's the load station.
Yep. So they start coming up with concept artwork. This is by Dave Rutterow, and they say, okay, well, we're going to have some little iron off-the-shelf rides. We're going to have our little dark ride, which will be Knott's Berry Tales. We're going to redo our theater called the John Wayne, we're going to the Good Time Theater, and we're going to have a little park-type setting area in the middle. And it's really cute, it's really charming, and they get right to work. Again, they have no time on this. And Marion hires a gentleman named Rick Campbell, who was a project architect with Design 27, also worked on Circus World. And the reason that she hires Rick to be the architectural designer for the Roaring Twenties is he comes up with this great solve. Originally, to get into the theater, you actually went in through the bottom. It's a little hard to see here, but
Yeah.
you went down there, and so what you had is you had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people spilling out the front and going across the train tracks into Ghost Town. He goes, why don't we move it all the way back and like wrap around the bumper cars, and you go in through the top and work your way down. And she thought that was a brilliant solution, and that's still how they do it today, right?
Yep. Success. These drawings are fantastic, by the way. It's impressive that we even have these. But all these sketches of bumper cars in Charleston Circle, they all expressed a beautiful, simple Roaring Twenties concept. And that was actually doable and buildable.
Right. And what's really neat about that whole little park section up there is there's kind of an iconic fountain in the middle. Now, if any of you are familiar with the 20th Century Fox film Hello, Dolly, there's a section in it called the Harmonium Gardens, and it has these beautiful fountains.
Rick Campbell went over to Fox Studios, and he wound up buying up some props, some architectural pieces. And one of the things that he purchased was a fountain. Not really knowing what he would do with it, he kind of put it off to the side, and later put it as the centerpiece of the Charleston Circle, only finding out later that it was a centerpiece in the movie Hello, Dolly.
And it was like $500 or something like that.
$2,500.
Oh, $2,500, okay. Well, still a bargain. And then the other thing that's really wonderful about the Roaring Twenties area is the amount of signage and neon signage. The gentleman to my right here knows a little something about neon. What do you have to say about these signs, Eric?
Well, I was really happy I got to tell Rick Campbell to his face just how much these signs meant to me, because as a little kid growing up, it wasn't just Berry Tales that was an influence. It was all of that neon in the Roaring Twenties that made me go, wow, I really like this stuff. But also, coming out of the darkness of the Ghost Town area, you're wandering into this world of light and color. It's fantastical, and everything is in motion. It kept people at Knott's Berry Farm after dark to continue opening their wallets.
It was really charming, and I wish we had a better video of that incredible light chaser sign on the top of the Berry Tales building. We just don't, but if anyone finds one, please send it our way, because it was a spectacular sign. The other big draw to the Roaring Twenties area was the world's first steel looping roller coaster, the Corkscrew. So how many of you here remember the Corkscrew? Did you guys get to ride the Corkscrew? Yeah, it was pretty incredible. It was a huge draw, probably the biggest draw to the new land it was. And this is actually up at Aero Development, who are known in the theme park world for doing a lot of conveyances and roller coasters. And so Marion liked the prototype so much that she actually bought it, brought it back to Knott's Berry Farm. So they're slammed right into construction. They're building the whole area. So what's going on back with Rolly during this time? Well, Rolly is going into production. And because the whole theme of the land is no longer Gypsy Camp, but is a Roaring Twenties area, he's got to take all the bears and all the animals and take all the previous costumes off and put little Roaring Twenties area costumes on them, right?
And the Berry Tales name hasn't quite evolved just yet. We have Girls in Berry, and we also have Knotts in Berry. So Knotts in Berry for quite a while.
Yep. So they're working in Irvine on Sky Park Circle. Gentleman on the left there is a man named Steve Kirk. He was the creative executive for Tokyo Disney Sea and had a long career at Disney. We've got Luann Davis, who worked at Knott's for a long time. We still don't know who the woman in the middle is. And then on the right is Doris Young, who did a lot of production work and paint and color work. And so this is Steve's big model that he made using a lot of Sculpey, and it's kind of this gorgeous model. And by the way, on your way out, if you didn't notice, Chris Crump actually milled a model of the Chug-a-Chug machine out there, which you see at the top right, which is pretty cool. You should check it out. So they went into production. So who was going to build all of this? And again, in a year, it's kind of crazy. Rolly knew a gentleman named Tommy O'Neill, and Tommy owned and operated a company called Fantasy Fair. It used to be operated up here in Hollywood. And he did a lot of the Main Street windows in the 1960s for Disneyland, and that's how Rolly knew him. And he did very simple things, kind of storefront window things, right?
Very simple up and down motion, and not even animatronics. It was just store window display type stuff.
Right. So Tommy got such a good advance on this job doing the production work that he actually was able to buy a warehouse and open up a shop right off, in Glendale off of San Fernando Boulevard, on the other side of the train tracks. So they were flying. They were going way, way fast. And again, for any of you who've done any production work in the theme park world, generally you will have working architectural shop drawings that you build everything from to make it really clear and so you don't make something wrong. They had no time for this, and they kind of took the guerrilla attitude that Rolly had for It's a Small World. You see those butcher paper, those craft paper things on the wall there? What are those, Eric?
Those are giant life-size drawings of what Rolly expects his people to build.
Yep.
There's no drafting. It's just marker on a piece of butcher paper, tape it to a wall, and tell an 18-year-old build that.
Life size. So if you were going to make the Theta Bear character, there's your drawing on the top left, and that's the figure you're expected to make. Go,
The talented folks that were making this in the warehouse in Glendale were really putting a lot of themselves into the characters as well. They had their own freedom in order to add to whatever that wild, weird thing was in order to make Rolly's dream come true.
Yep. Another thing that's really wonderful about this attraction is the graphics and the signage. That was one thing Rolly always told me. He said, if you don't have a big budget for your dark ride or your attraction, add a lot of whimsical signage in it because it's not too expensive. This is a woman named Susie McLean, wonderful graphic designer, and she did the wanted posters in the ride and all the graphics and the little jelly jam, Knott's Berry Jam labels that you still see to this day.
Cover of the book.
Oh, the cover of our, well, of course, yeah. So she also, I'd be remiss if I didn't, she did this beautiful load mural that ran the whole stretch of the load area there up at the top. It's gorgeous. But yeah, we talked her into getting out of retirement. We designed the cover for our book, and she broke out her rapidographs and actually hand inked that cover on the book for us. So it was beautiful. Really nice. And then let's talk more about crazy production. I mentioned Chris Crump is here with us tonight. This is nuts. Again, anything that would be architectural in nature or furniture or anything, you would have working shop drawings, but not in this case. So in this case, Rolly would do a rough napkin sketch. At best, he would do a tight kind of an elevation, but certainly with not any dimensions on it. And so Chris told us, he'd get this drawing from his dad, and he'd go, okay, well, Dad, about how big is this pipe here? He's like, I don't know, about like 2 feet. He's like, okay. And then he would have to scale up from the rest of it, which is kind of crazy. But that's how they had to roll because they literally had no time. They had to slam this stuff out.
And that's Chris.
That's Chris, yeah, believe it or not. There's Chris with his mullet haircut and his Gentle Giant t-shirt. Just off the road. So Chris actually got this job. He actually started on Circus World with his dad, but before that he was a roadie with Jethro Tull, if you can believe that, which is pretty cool. And he made all this from scratch, and it's kind of amazing. There was this big Rube Goldberg kind of machine in the middle of the first scene called the Chug-a-Chug machine, and you'll see a video of it in a little bit. But this thing, it's really kind of a tribute to his dad that Chris did. So they're working along in production, and oh my gosh, what happens? March 26, 1975.
The Roaring 20th catches fire.
Incredible. And they told everyone, they said, don't mix teams that are union and non-union, but that's exactly what they did, and this happened.
Not that we're placing blame.
We're not saying how this happened, we're just saying that's what the situation was. And it was pretty devastating. Now, luckily for the team, other than the Chug-a-Chug machine and a bunch of the insulation paper rock work, they didn't really have much in there in terms of show set or figures. But the poor Chug-a-Chug machine, they still had to go back, and Chris had to remake it from scratch. And I think, Chris, how long did it take you to build the first one? Where are you sitting, Chris? Yeah, how long was the first one to build?
Close to 6 months.
And then how long did you have to build the second one? About 9 weeks.
9 weeks.
Yeah. Crazy.
That was my introduction to overtime.
No choice. And, they are living and breathing in this environment.
You can see in the background of the photo on that upper left, they are dealing with a charred black warehouse.
Right.
The ruins of what was. But they build and they build and they build. They start bringing in everything from Glendale, the Glendale warehouse, and they are building at a rapid pace. They only get, 6 weeks extra for opening?
That was the extension that Marion gave them, which is kind of incredible.
6 weeks.
Somehow they did it, though. So there's a very proud Rolly Crump in the Weird Woods scene. Again, it's so surprising, to me as a little kid. I was 5 years old when I rode this ride. And you're going through this incredible environment, and you just see how flimsy this thing is. It's just like, little 2x4s with, chicken wire and insulation paper over them. It's kind of
the magic of blacklight.
Right. Anyway, the Roaring Twenties open, and it's gorgeous. It's this beautiful, incredible new land at Knott's Berry Farm. It couldn't look more different than the rest of the farm, though. And so these are some photos of the interior as it looked on opening day, and they're kind of as good as it's ever going to look. We like showing these because it's really hard to get across to people how charming and wonderful. And Rolly he mixed UV and incandescent lighting in here, so it had a very magical, kind of glowing look to it.
The thing I want to get across is that it was a 360-degree world. Just like when you're riding the Mine Ride, Bud Hurlbut's famous Mine Ride at Knott's Berry Farm, you could look up, down, behind you, and you were in a completely themed world. And it's the same here. You're looking through landscapes, not just at a flat wall. You're looking past things as you're moving through them, and it's an entire world. It seems much bigger, especially through a child's eyes, than it was.
Very magical. This is the fortune teller scene. It had a lot of magical special effects. There was Pepper's ghost gags. This is one of them. A gentleman named Leo Benke, who was a magician, created a lot of these for Rolly, hired an animator to make, so these are these little teapots that had little silly spirits spouting out of them. And so we found some of the film prints of this. We were able to put that in there. But a lot of black light, very charming, wonderful design. This is really Rolly Crump being left off the leash to kind of design something however he wants.
Completely the mind of an incredible artist.
Here's that weird woods scene, and again, very, really, really full, and just kind of felt like you were in this other strange world. That chicken character with the hair rollers, I do not know what's going on there. It is so strange.
But we love it.
And then you did make your way into the fair at the very end of the attraction. It was a very long ride. It was about an 11-minute attraction. And there was a full balloon that actually went up and down in the rafters, and there's a little band that played at the end. And then you saw the whole little Berry family. They'd made their way all to the fair, and then, of course, Crafty Coyote, who's been stealing pies all along the way, is put in jail and being tortured with the world's largest boysenberry pie at the end. So we have, I don't know, whenever we try and explain Knott's Berry Tales to people who didn't actually write it, it's really hard because, like Eric just said, it's a 360-degree, you can go back in time right now. You can watch a Blu-ray director's cut of Citizen Kane and see it pretty close to how, like, Orson Welles intended you to see it in the 1940s. You can't go back in time and ride Adventure Through Inner Space like it was in 1967. You can't go back and ride Knott's Berry Tales. But what we've done here is we've made, it's a little bit about 10-minute video, gives Eric and I a break, and it is a documentation video that Knott's shot to document the costumes for future use. And we've gone back and we've actually taken all the original audio recordings, master recordings from the ride, the music and sound effects and soundtracks, which were thankfully saved by Dale Tetley. We are really grateful to. And we've mixed them all together to give you a sense of what it would be like to ride Knott's Berry Tales in 1975.
Welcome one and welcome all, folks, to a family fair for all folks riding on Knott's Berry Tail Ride. We'll go back to the Roaring 20s, and you'll come out a roaring plenty when you see what the bruins are brewing inside. Welcome one and all, y'all. Ribbit. 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 Ribbit.
And in the middle, that was this kind of dark cave. You couldn't see much other than these blacklight spiders about to drop on your head, so I've edited out a good amount of it. It was actually an area that Rolly wanted to have a steep climb and a drop-off into weird woods where he was going to fire off strobe lights to screw up your eyes so you wouldn't know where you were, but they couldn't afford to do that, unfortunately. So it just ended up being a black tunnel, so I just kind of chopped that out. Or some of it out. Not as much as I thought.
Dr. Fox's Weird Juice. That's right, folks. That's Dr. Fox's Weird Juice, spelled J-U-I-C-E. Folks, you'll experience the most amazing, the most incredible, the absolutely most sensational rejuvenation of fortitude and
So that's what's left of the marionettes from the earliest version of the ride. So you see how some of these things end up calcifying and end up in the ride at the end. Somehow his pie got smaller at some point.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Ta-ta. So long. Goodbye. 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 Welcome one and all. Y'all come have a ball. Things are very fine.
The safety lap bar will open automatically. step to your left onto the moving belt.
Things are very fine, riding on the old Knott's line.
I can and have grooved to that soundtrack all day.
You know, we love that ride so much. I was 5 years old when I rode it for the first time, right when it opened, and it exploded my brain. And I went home to kindergarten the next day and did a bunch of drawings of it. So it really influenced me as a designer in the theme park industry. So the 20s roar again. The Roaring 20s open. Huge success with Marion Knott. And they had a really interesting campaign basically called There's a Whole New Park Going On.
You. I said you. You, my friends, are in for the time of your lives, because Knott's Berry Farm's old time
clearly influenced by the Music Man.
I say there's a whole new park going on. There's a whole new park going on. I'll speak frankly, my friends. If Knott's brand new, there's lots to do. Look around. Don't be shy. That's old West Coast town, my oh my. There's a whole new park going on. Don't run and hide. Take the wild log ride. There's a whole new park going on. Why, here's Fiesta Village in Old Mexico. Take a ride in a spinning sombrero. There's a whole new park going on at Knott's. Here's a Roaring 20s, fun aplenty. I say fun aplenty in the new Roaring 20s. There's a whole new park going on. There's a whole new park going on. I say Roaring 20s, starlight dancing, corkscrew ride, and wheeler-dealer bumper cars. Ah, my friends. Yes. Knott's Berry Farm's old time adventures are waiting for you. Yes, you. There's a whole new park going on. There's a whole new park going on.
So I got to point out, only 5 years have passed since that last commercial that you saw.
Yeah.
That 5-year gap is all Marion making changes at Knott's Berry Farm because, hey, we're changing too.
It's incredible, and they almost triple the gate overnight, which is lunacy. They have this huge opening night party. You can see, hard to see, but Marion down at the bottom in full flapper regalia, and just one of the biggest parties in Orange County, apparently. And again, this whole look for this part of Knott's Berry Farm, very different from the ghost town, right, Eric?
That was the goal. They wanted to create a space that was a whole new spot, and of course, it was dedicated to Walter and Cordelia in the 1920s when they came to Buena Park. It's 1920s according to the founders of the company, and does that sound familiar, Buena Vista Street?
Yep. They actually had flagpole sitters for a time on top of the wheeler-dealer bumper car building. And the mighty corkscrew, I think, probably is the thing that drove things more than anything. There's a couple of really wonderful photos here by a gentleman named Lou Perry. His daughter, Sue Bossert, is here with us today, and they've been very generous in sharing a lot of these incredible photos that he's taken.
They're great.
Yeah, really wonderful work. So,
the Roaring 20s was so successful
that they had immediately, like the next year immediately, to expand to handle all the bodies coming in. So what did they do? They thought, well, let's go ahead and keep with the Roaring 20s theme. Everyone seems to like it. Let's add barnstorming, and we'll call it the Roaring 20s Airfield, and we'll keep expanding. And one of the things that they added that was really interesting was Marion knew about the company Intamin, who does roller coasters. They had this parachute drop idea in their headquarters in Switzerland. That's at the top there. That's Marion and Rick Campbell out in Switzerland on the side of a, oh gosh, what was that building, Eric? Was it it was like a sugar mill or something like that. It was some sort of industrial thing. They needed height where they tested it out. And so again, Marion bought the prototype and brought it back to Buena Park. And a big hit with everyone. And tell us a little bit about the sky job. I think it's over 200 feet tall, right, Eric?
It's a massive undertaking. It was since Independence Hall was an icon at this height, that became an icon for all the freeways around Buena Park. You could see that giant neon K from afar. Right. And that 20-foot tall, double-sided and animated neon K was so impressive that, well, the Museum of Neon Art had to basically save it.
Yeah, Eric, they saved it. The new one's LED, right?
The one that they have up there right now is LED, yep. But the original neon from 1976, fantastic.
Right. Incredible. They also had a couple of more hard rides, but they themed them all successfully to the airfield. And again, you don't have to go crazy with theming on an off-the-shelf iron ride. You just need a little bit of effort. Mm-hmm. They had a big buffeteria that they called Captain Kelly's. And I thought that was interesting. And then, disco dancing was so big in the 70s. By the late 70s, they were getting a lot of complaints from local neighbors in Buena Park. If you've ever been to Knott's, you see a lot of people have their houses near Knott's Berry Farm. And so for the disco dancing, they took the area that used to be the old horse barns for the Mark Smith Horse Show and made the Cloud 9 Ballroom where disco dancing could take place. And that building is still there today.
Hugely successful.
And then the big ride was the cycle chase or the motorcycle chase. And tell us a little bit about that, Eric.
The motorcycle chase was absolutely incredible if you look at the faces of the people in these photos. But then they stepped off and went, oh, ow. The center of gravity on these beautiful motorcycles was way up high, so people would be dragged back, dangling by their safety belts as they were going back into the station. They had so many health and bone and joint complaints about that ride that it did not last at all.
It was a big, big problem for them. But that said, the airfield was pretty successful too. So let's take a look at some of the video. And again, I loved all this as a little kid growing up in Southern California. For you nerds in the audience, this is original BGM from the Roaring '20s I'm playing. Also, look at the landscaping. Really tastefully done. Not overwrought, just enough.
Beautiful.
That sign.
Beautiful. 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 Bring it back. I want more.
Great, great stuff. So in a span of just about 3 years, Marion Knott basically grows Knott's Berry Farm by almost 50%. And I gotta say, I feel like if she hadn't done that, Knott's Berry Farm might not be there today, right?
If it was just a ghost town, it wouldn't have evolved with the times that needed to step into the world of roller coasters in order to attract that 1970s audience, and of course disco dancing too.
Right.
The one thing I want to point out in this 1976 aerial shot, and Chris is going to point it out for me, is the aerial in the Roaring '20s airfields. The streets and the airfields were literally painted and lit to be landing strips for planes.
Yeah, there were chaser lights, like you're taxiing into the airfield, right? All along here.
So when you were up in your parachute, you could look down and see the airfield below you where planes would land. It was insane.
Right, right. So big draw, big success. Marion Knott taking charge. Except for the motorcycle chase. The motorcycle chase was a big problem. So we're gonna take a little sidebar here and talk for a minute about our friend Eddie Sato, who's an incredible designer, legend in the theme park industry. That's a great photo from Ghost Town. That's Eddie Sato up there. So Eddie Sato was a young man, and like many of us when we're younger who want to work in the theme park industry, he was a salesman, and he wanted desperately to design rides and shows, and Disney wasn't answering the call, and so he basically got in touch with Rick Campbell, who was running the art department there at that time, and bugged him senseless with his ideas for rides and attractions. And these are some of the sketches, but what did Rick tell him with all his ideas?
Rick said, "You're crazy but talented, I'll hire you."
Right.
But Eddie was 20 years old when Rick Campbell basically said, "I'm going to hand over this concept to you. What can you do with the motorcycle chase?" He came up with this idea of little rascals, Roaring '20s, going crazy in soapbox racers. So he created an outdoor dark ride to re-theme the entire motorcycle chase attraction. And it was hugely successful. And I'm going to say again, they put $1 million ride onto the hands of a 20-year-old who had never built anything before.
And Eddie felt like, he said, if I screwed it up, they put it on me so they could blame it on me if I screwed it up too badly. Yeah. But it was great because he kind of got to do what he wanted design-wise.
And it was a huge success.
Yeah, and it was great. Yeah, he had Max Sennett, music playing in Firehouse 5. It was all cute little animals again, so it kind of went with the Berry Tales vernacular. Big, big hit overnight. And, I saw this, I think I was like 10 when this came out. Excellent. I remember seeing the commercials growing up. I wanted to go here so bad. It was so fun. Let's look at that. The show set too, right? So sculpted animal figures. You know, so those of you who go to Halloween Haunt every year, you might recognize some of these props and things have shown up in mazes, looking worse for the wear every year.
And some of the backgrounds for this were painted by Croft Studios.
Correct.
They went to Sid and Marty Croft and had some of the painting done for this guy. And of course, they had no budget, so when you see background crates piled up in a corner, they went to downtown Los Angeles.
Right.
And just picked up crates off of a street corner and threw them in the ride because they had so little money.
Right, the bombs, the finale for the ride, this dog in the middle, his name is Seymour Duds, haha, and he operated a fireworks factory, and that was the last scene of the ride. You went into his fireworks factory and everything exploded. They were making bombs out of rubber beach balls and spray painting them black and putting the cap from the spray paint on the top and adding a rope. Like that's the level of budget they had.
That's the budget.
All you buckaroos, Knott's Berry Farm's wacky soapbox racer is about to take off for yet another real wacky ride to Catnip Junction. And once you're there, if you dare, you can get in the swing of things on Knott's new Dragon Swing ride. But then, of course, at night, there's Knott's incredible fireworks machine. It's all fun, fun, fun for you-know-who. At Knott's Berry Farm, that's where it is.
Yay.
Love that iconic K. All right. So we're going to slide forward a little bit into the future here. What happens next? Well, Rolly's done with Knott's Berry Tales. He goes back. He actually bounces back and forth between Disney for fair years, and he's pretty much out of the conversation at this point. But what they do is they bring in a gentleman named Terry Van Gorder from Magic Mountain. He is the first non-family general manager, and he ends up becoming the CEO of Knott's. And he actually brokers a deal with Charles Schultz to bring the first children's area called Camp Snoopy, which was actually sorely needed and very beautiful and very, very well done and is still there today and very charming. Amongst other things they had there, they had this little weird fun house, and we'll come back to that in a second.
But what about Berry Tales?
But what about Berry Tales, Eric? Well, what's going on with Berry Tales now? So it's still in operation. A gentleman named Vern Preston, who's kind of a tinkerer at the farm, he switches out all the animation and makes it basically pneumatic, and so that's kind of odd.
The animation becomes a little jolty.
Right, a little weird. He adds this little truck gag in the front, down in the bottom, because the problem is, the ride is up on the second level, and a lot of people would never see it, which was always problematic, but they wanted to keep the arcade down at the bottom because that was a big moneymaker, so that's where the ride was and remains to this day. But one of the problems that Knott's had over the years, and especially throughout the 80s, was whenever they had some sort of an event or let people go loose in the ride, they would end up damaging the ride quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And this is one big event. It was called Mardi Gras Madness. What do you know about this one, Eric?
Quite a bit. Well,
Tell
Mardi Gras Madness was the opposite of Knott's Scary Farm. They had a private evening in October for Knott's Scary Farm, hugely successful, multiple nights. They wanted to do the same thing in spring and thought Mardi Gras. However, nobody came. They still closed the entire park, had a special private event with gigantic floats and parades and et cetera, but nobody showed up, and they even themed Berry Tales to Mardi Gras by putting capes on all the characters.
Lots of capes.
So Mardi Gras Madness also stomped all over Knott's Berry Tales.
But the worst one would be Knott's Scary Farm, right?
Oh my gosh!
I mean, every year, and I mean, they would sometimes they would just turn the lights off and call it a scary ride. But a lot of times they would theme things, and they would take these poor figures and they would pour blood all over them, or they would put crazy masks on.
Here comes my favorite part. Hang on.
And
wait! Don't touch my girlfriend!
Yeah,
Don't touch my girlfriend!
Yeah. So I guess the point we're trying to make here is the ride was not treated gingerly, and it basically suffered quite a bit through the years.
To be honest, the surviving props that we have from Berry Tales that were saved by Del Tetley, the surviving props still have Halloween Haunt staples in them.
Right.
That we are pulling out today.
Yeah. All right, so now moving forward even further, in 1986, I was very disappointed to show up one day because it was the first time I had borrowed a video camera and I was going to videotape Knott's Berry Tales, but much to my dismay, there was a giant crate of a dinosaur out front, and what happened was the new COO, Terry Van Gorder, decided, you know what, I've got this idea for an educational dinosaur attraction. What if we tear out Knott's Berry Tales, throw all the show set and the figures out, and put them into storage or maybe even in the trash, and we make this ride about the dinosaurs. And again, this had a very fast track project. Now, Bob Gurr actually worked on this.
9 months?
What's that?
Was it 9 months?
Yeah, it was something like 9 or 10 months. And again, it was an insane amount of time. And you know, one of the ways they got around that was they actually skipped the process of tooling. So these dinosaurs, when they broke down, if you know anything about that production, they fell apart rather quickly, and it aged rather fast. Although, you know, we do kind of like this ride, and it had an interesting soundtrack, but it was very sad to lose Knott's Berry Tales. So Knott's Berry Tales was actually a lot of the figures in the show set. They thought, well, let's take these figures. We're not doing anything with them. They're kind of in rough shape, but let's put them in the funhouse in Camp Snoopy. And boy, that just didn't work out too well. It wasn't built for that. It wasn't designed for that. This is some video actually shot back in the day, and you can just see, you know, first of all the figures were like within reach of the guests. So frogs were disappearing left and right, or getting graffitied and beaten up on. The staging was odd. The character, I mean, look at that, I don't know. It was kind of, and then a lot of the eyes, they swapped out the eyes with these weird, like, giant pupils. I don't know. I'm just having nightmares looking at that again.
But for a giant geek like myself, even though that was meant for kids in a kid's land, I still went and spent a lot of time in that space because I just wanted the memories of Berry Tales.
Right. And this also suffered every year from Knott's Halloween Haunt because they put mazes in this space too. So again, the figures got beat up even more and even more and even more, and it was heartbreaking. Really sad. So
it was a sad ending.
It is a sad part. So 1990 to 2020, 30 years. That is a long time. Lots going on then. There was a weird thing going on in terms of design ethos in the late 90s, early 2000s. They tried all this, I don't know, that was, you know, Robin Hall told us, he said we were all over the map. They were trying to do some sort of a Pacific, you know, sort of a thing. They were trying to appeal to teenagers, but they did these weird Jack-in-the-Box looking heads.
The Knott's family was fighting with merchandise, fighting with marketing, was fighting with design, and it was a clash, and we got giant clown heads.
And then in the upper left, that's this, you know, they tore out the wacky soapbox racers and put this looping coaster they bought from Japan, put a big concrete pad. Again, it lost a lot of the charm, unfortunately. And then Kingdom of the Dinosaurs, which actually had been shut down for quite some time, it basically, what's the year of?
It wound up rotting, unfortunately, because it was a big private space and kids would go and make out in the ride. They wound up shutting it down so that it became 4 cars itself, and then they would push it through, stop the vehicle in the middle of nowhere.
It's very strange.
And in order to load another chain of cars. It just didn't work. They just shut the thing down entirely. It was too many people, too much maintenance, and they just said, close it.
Yeah, but then at a certain point, they came up with another idea, and they thought, well, in 2015, let's hire this company out of Canada called Triotech, and they're kind of known for doing kind of shooting gallery type dark rides where they have screens with projections, some sort of CG effects, and we have these vehicles, and you can pull in front of, and you can shoot at these things. So the idea was floated, well, let's do this steampunk look, this Journey to the Iron Reef.
One more design element. Let's bring in steampunk.
It was very strange because, you know, by that point, it had been about, like, you know, 6 or 7 years, like the steampunk craze had gone. I don't know what it has to do with Knott's Berry Farm. I did appreciate, like, they had like a little, like, old Berry Tales vehicle in some of the scenes, but it was very odd, and it started out popular but aged rather quickly. I don't know. I was always not really, you know, a big fan of that.
We won't get into it.
But then, this is really strange. Eric and I, you know, of course we're always talking about Knott's Berry Farm. There have always been these rumors over the years that, like, hey, you know, what if Knott's Berry Tales come back? And we're like, yeah, right, like that's never gonna happen. But all of a sudden, we see this little commercial.
Boy, how I still remember my first journey to the fair. The whole family crammed into that old delivery truck as we traveled through a frog forest, a fortune teller's camp, and a very weird woods. Ma and Pa always warned us to keep our eyes peeled for that pie-napping, crafty coyote. And with the big 100th anniversary coming up, what better time to gather my little cubs and return to the...
Knott's Berry Tales, Return to the Fair. An all-new 4D interactive ride Coming summer 2020.
Okay, so collectively our heads exploded. And never thought this would happen. And what was really interesting about it was, you know, the people who in charge and management were our age at this point. People who grew up with the ride like us. So people like Ken Parks and John Storbeck were really instrumental. They said, what if we take the same ride system, but we retheme it around Knott's Berry Tales, which was kind of amazing. And the more amazing thing about it was they actually got in touch with Chris Crump. And that was really great because Chris was able to share with them all the photos and the wonderful things you see in this book, Rolly's original design. So they actually were able to work with Trio Tech and kind of make it commensurate with what Rolly did. Also, people like a gentleman named Eric Christensen who did this wonderful like whirligig, Rolly Crump inspired kinetic sculpture out front. Couldn't be more charming.
The illustrators who worked on the 4D aspect of the ride borrowed heavily from what the Crumps had done before. There's little bits of inspiration throughout the newly animated attraction.
Right. And what I love about it, oh, let's watch this little video. Sorry.
We wanted to do when we brought it back, we got a hold of Rolly's son Chris, and Chris was with us, you know, from the very beginning. We started to talk about it and how we wanted to not just recreate the ride, but bring that story back, albeit 30 years into the future. But we wanted to pay homage to that story, but update it. Not only with new technology and make it immediate driven, but to be able to tell that story in a way that the people that preceded us and created that story would be proud of.
They've captured the flavor and the whimsy of Rolly's original design. They stayed with Rolly's style, they stayed with the same storyline, like the order of the scenes, it's all exactly the same. The look, the graphics, the characters, I mean, they did a bang-up job. I shared photography from the attraction when it was originally built in '75 that I have, and that's when everything was brand new, right? And fresh out of the shop. I worked, with the team that Trio Tech that did the video, and we interacted a little bit. We had a little bit of input on some of the characters. It's sometimes shocked with the fan base reaction, and you know, Berry Tales is our favorite ride. You know, it's like, yeah, really?
The interesting thing I think about this attraction in particular is there's really two ways to experience it. You can experience it like a traditional dark ride and just enjoy the atmosphere and the scenery and take it all in, or you can experience it from a gameplay perspective and play the game that's in there, which is also very, very fun.
Yeah, you don't have to play the game to have a good time, and especially the nostalgia for people who've ridden it before.
The different thing we did here was we tried to take the elements of the three-dimensional elements of a traditional dark ride and marry it to the media, so you kind of get this dimensional game experience.
I think they'll like the characters. I think they'll kind of enjoy the whole experience. It's different, you know. It's but it's like it's a high-quality dark ride, you know. And for people who like that sort of thing, I think people will like it.
Adorable.
So it's really, really cute and charming, and one of the things I really loved about it was, you know, the Iron Reef version was basically just screens, and you would park in front of a screen. What's interesting was, you know, they added a lot of show set to this to make these more realistic environments, or environments that were more commensurate with what Rolly did originally. And they actually were going to open in 2020, and they actually, because of COVID lockdown situation, they were able to add even more show set to it. So it's really a pretty rich, for a shooting gallery type dark ride, I think it's really sweet, and it's a worthy successor to the original one.
If COVID had a silver lining, it was that they had more time to work on Berry Tales.
Yeah, they've got walk-around characters, they've got all sorts of merchandising, plush. I mean, it's just really sweet and charming. So let's hear a little last word from Marion.
I think back 50 years ago, what this place was like, there was nothing out here. It was fields all around here. There was this first hotel brought in, and to see where we have gone in those 50 years since this first hotel came in and we started this town, it gives me tremendous pride to think that my family, my dad, particularly because this was his dream, could build something 50 years ago that is still today giving so much entertainment to so many people.
Excuse the shaky camera work by a 20-year-old Chris Merritt. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out to our presentation. That is the story of Knott's Berry Tales, and I do believe we're gonna do some Q&A, yeah?
Are we up for it?
Yeah.
We are. Can we
Yeah.
get the microphone turned on? So we are going to do Q&A, but if you can wait for me to bring the microphone to you. And then once we have concluded, if you all can kindly exit, Chris and Eric, they will be out there, and you can ask all your questions. I just ask that you not come rush the stage. But they'll have all the time in the world for you in the lobby, and they will be signing. So yeah, so please exit once we are done. And who has a question?
Again, thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's incredible to see you guys. And so many familiar faces.
Right.
First question. Yeah.
Do you have the formula for the berry smell?
That was a canned thing, and interestingly enough, I think Rolly got that from Bud Hurlbut, who had a canned pine tree smell in the log ride, and he asked Bud about that, and then went to the place that sold those and said, hey, can you get this in the smell of sweet berries? And he said, yeah. So for those of you who don't know what Tom's talking about, it's Tom Morris, legendary Imagineer, by the way, folks. Right here. And by the way, his book on early wed Imagineers is going to be absolutely incredible. I highly recommend you when it comes out. Anyway, the first scene, the factory scene in Knott's Berry Tales had the smell of sweet boysenberries permeating through, and that's a big memory that a lot of people have.
Not only that, when Kingdom of the Dinosaurs opened, it still smelled like
boysenberries.
boysenberries.
It did. It was weird. Yeah.
So can that be reconstructed? Can someone make candles?
Here, right now?
No, but, you know. Or is it in there now, in the current version?
They actually did bring in the boysenberry smell for the new ride. They did bring it in. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I hope it's still there. I don't know.
Right,
Yes, hello. A couple of months ago on TikTok, there was rumors that it was going to be sold. Knott's Berry Farm was being sold or was sold.
Oh, well, if it's on TikTok, it's got to be true.
But since you're here, I'd like to ask you if you know anything about that. Has it been sold? Has the theme park been sold?
I'm sure that's not true.
No,
okay.
We don't necessarily have a foot in the door for all the machinations of what's going on way up above, but Six Flags, Cedar Fair, Knott's Berry Farm are in a gigantic commercial orgy, and I don't really know how it's going to end. We're going to see what happens to Knott's Berry Farm, and at the moment, even we're not invited to the table, so we're going to wait and watch.
Yep.
Thank you.
Why did Marion have such a quick time that it had to be built so quickly? If she wanted like a good ride, and everyone knows it takes a while to do that, what was the point of having it done so quickly?
Oh, I could answer that. They wanted the summer crowd. They wanted to open in time for all of those kids to get out of summer school. They weren't going to wait until August. They wanted a ride immediately. So the Roaring Twenties opened in June, but the Berry Tales still had that fire to deal with. They didn't open until July 4th. And mark it on your calendars, July 4th of this year is the 50th anniversary of Berry Tales.
And I think, without sounding too mean, I think naivete is behind that too. Someone like Disney or Universal, a typical project, life and death of a project is, 4 years, 5 years. A whole new park is a 10, 15-year project. So, but when you're a regional park, like Knott's Berry Farm was and still is, frankly, a lot of times just things are decided very quickly and like, oh, but then if we're going to do it, let's get it up for the summer crowds, right?
They needed the immediate results, and they needed those results to hit the bank. That actually is a big, big question. It's the finances of Knott's Berry Farm. It's insane to read about it, and we've dug deep.
But that also happened to Rolly on It's a Small World. It was like a 10 or 11 month turnaround project because they weren't going to do It's a Small World for the 64 World's Fair. Then Walt Disney said, oh yeah, we are going to do it. It was like, okay, here we go. We open in about a year. So,
next question.
Yeah.
Speaking of summer crowds, I was thinking about the 1970s and 80s. They used to have these summer concerts that were fairly popular, and they got some fairly big names. I was wondering if you had any stories. I remember that I think the Everly Brothers broke up one night there.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, that's correct. I've got a friend who was present for that guitar breaking. Yeah, Knott's Berry Farm was huge with entertainment. They hired the best entertainers. I mean, not only did they have that gigantic John Wayne stage, they put Debbie Reynolds, Phyllis Diller, they put entire shows on it. They even had a traveling show for Peter Pan, the Broadway musical, come through for paid tickets. Sometimes you would get entertainment for free included with your admission to the farm, and sometimes you paid a nickel extra. If Victor Borgia was coming through town, they'd get him to hit that stage. Knott's Berry Farm was for everybody, I swear.
Hey, Eric.
Howdy.
Hey, so I have a quick question for you. With the research you both have done, in terms of like sort of this hallucinogenic aspect of what Rolly did, and the sort of aesthetic around that, or the zeitgeist or the feel around that, I feel like back in the 70s there were a lot, at least locally growing up here, there were a lot of sort of trippy kids shows and stuff that all seemed kind of the same ilk. And with what you've researched and what you know, is this primarily, was this national, or was this more of a Southern California context?
You mean like the art style? Like
just all the marijuana and the pot and forming the design.
Well, we could look over at what the Crofts were doing at rides. I mean, they were doing the same drugs and making great children's programming on TV and making rides in Atlanta. They were building some incredible immersive things. I just wish that we had the video and the photos that proved how amazing these were, because my biggest fear with these videos is that all of you are going to go, no, it was incredible. It was sensor around. It was everything you wanted it to be, with sights and sounds and smells. It was everything.
Yeah. And one more quick question. After the fire, was any of the burnt wood or any of that incorporated into Knott's Berry Tales?
I don't think so. Chris? Nope. Yeah.
If only. No. And thank you for the question. I agree on the psychedelics of the time. It was nationwide.
That's a big.
It was nationwide.
There's lots of other examples of that kind of stuff.
That's another book. Somebody needs to work on that book.
Yep.
Yeah, next question.
Yes.
What was the ride system? Was it an Omnimover ride system? And who built the original vehicles?
Oh, Acton. Where's Albert? I think he has that memorized. Oh, Albert's outside.
No.
Yeah, they. I want to say so. It's a typical. It's not a bus bar system like you'd see at some of the Fantasyland rides. It's more akin to the People Mover, where it's got wheels and rollers pushing it along. That's how it used to be and how it was with Kingdom of the Dinosaurs. It was a cable? It was a cable. There, Tom will tell you about it.
A never stopping motion, yeah.
Right. And they redid it at one point because someone got their foot caught on the vehicle and there was an accident. So you'll look at photos of Knott's Berry Tales and there's kind of like a sharp-edged, angular, more of a trolley looking, which is what Rolly wanted, a little trolley car. And then they softened it all up at one point. So you can actually date photos that don't have dates by the different look of those vehicles. Yeah. Is that Ken Bruce?
Hey, Chris and Ken. Eric. Could you give a quick shout out to that earworm that never left my brain for decades?
The music?
The music. A quick shout out to the guy who wrote it.
Yeah.
And how that came to be.
Bob Brunner wrote the soundtrack. And again, big surprise, Rolly knew him from Disney, so Bob Brunner did lots of Disney. And again, Tom's probably the best person to say, what are some other things that Bob Brunner wrote for the studio? Okay.
He was involved with the films, with the live action films. So he was kind of a mentor of Buddy Baker.
Okay.
And his style was very similar to Buddy's.
So
a lot of
those
those.
That you don't know, Buddy Baker did the Haunted Mansion soundtrack and
right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of those, like Kurt Russell films.
Oh, okay. That darn cat.
And he may have done that. He came. I think he came on board in the late '60s. He was a relatively young guy.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna get back to the song itself. I know the guy did a lot, but I have to tell you, the lyrics for that ride song are masterful. The puns that are involved are witty and wicked and bizarre. He named characters in the Weird Woods that didn't exist but now have names.
Right.
All those lyrics are in the book. I wanted to make sure that the lyrics were recorded somehow, and they're in the book. But not only that, we have to thank Dale Tetley.
Yeah, Dale Tetley, yeah.
Because it was Dale Tetley who, at the very end of the ride's life, wound up saving so many characters, animatronics, pieces of furnishings
But
that are still
audio,
alive.
the audio.
He saved the audio tracks.
Yeah, yeah.
He took the spindle, he took the reels off and kept them in his garage forever
Yeah.
until they were digitized by Albert.
Yeah.
And Albert's outside, we'll thank him in a minute, but that soundtrack in its absolute entirety with all of the sound from the background still exists, and I think it's on YouTube. It's incredible.
I mean, it goes without saying, these things don't last forever, right?
No.
Tape rot, degradation, all that.
No,
So
and as far as we know, the soundtrack for Kingdom of the Dinosaurs was not saved anywhere.
Right,
I've,
yeah.
I've never been able to find Kingdom of the Dinosaurs soundtrack. That one's still,
Tom Nadeau, who wrote that, he thought he might have his original soundtrack on like DAT tapes, but he couldn't find them, and they might be rotted by now. So anyway, all this to say, preserve stuff when you can. And then it's just a big Disney crossover. Like, I mean, Rolly just called in favors by people who used to work for Imagineering who were freelancing. So guys like Dave Schweninger, who set up the shop at Mapo and helped build all the Pirates of the Caribbean figures. He did the audio system in the ride.
Should we do one more question?
Yeah.
One more.
Question, did you guys ride the original Corkscrew?
Yes.
How was it compared to, I guess it still exists,
You
but
can
over
still
at
ride it
Silverwood.
today.
Yeah, it was short and really fun.
I went to Idaho in order to ride it in my adulthood, and I rode it. I gave it 3 times, and then I went, oh, I'm good.
Yeah.
No, it was wonderful to actually sit in those little lap bars again and hear that rickety nature of that little old ride. It was wonderful, but of course it seems so much smaller to me now that I'm an adult.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, the corkscrew.
It was quick. It was like 90 seconds, right?
The corkscrew, it's wonderful. Yeah, and they unfortunately when they built it in Idaho, they didn't put the lake underneath it. The point of the lake underneath the corkscrew was that when you went upside down, you could see yourself in reflection.
Oh, that's
And
actually
that
really
was part
cool.
of the joy of riding it at Knott's Berry Farm.
Well, you got a similar version, but it's a little taller called Viper at Magic Mountain.
I gotcha. Well, you guys, I am so thrilled to see you, and I want you all to take some Knott's Berry Farm with you. Enjoy that Berry Tales book.
See you.
Thank you, guys.
I'm glad somebody asked about Bob